Did I lose you guys? Or are you still there?
I'm still here.
Sorry.
I've got you.
Yep.
I can't hear you
He can't
both
hear
anymore.
us.
Hang
I'm
on.
making thumbs up on Zoom to signal to him that I can hear him. I can hear him.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm not hearing
I
anything.
Can hear
Super
you.
weird.
Can you hear me? I can hear you. This is the song of the millennial.
My back hurts. I slept funny on my neck.
Hello and welcome to Because Language, a show about linguistics, the science of language. I'm Daniel Midgley. Let's meet the team. He says what he means, and he says it mean. It's Ben Ainsley.
I endorse this introduction.
It's good.
Thank you.
Good.
At least as far as the feedback from some fans goes.
She says what she means, and sometimes she doesn't say the thing because you can never get in trouble for not saying the thing, but sometimes she beats herself up afterwards for wishing she... Oh, sorry, no, that's me. Sorry.
No, that is also me.
Should I keep going? I can keep going. I feel like we're on the same vibe on this one. It's Hedvig Hurgard.
Sometimes colleagues of mine are like, oh, I also wish I could do a podcast. I'll do that later on in my career when I feel more secure and where I don't feel worried about what people will think about what I say. And I'm like, oh.
Should I be worried about that?
Now I have that.
Was that the hack I was supposed to use? Whoops. Joke's on your colleague. There is no security coming down the pipe for any academics anymore.
No, it's just one of those things that you just do. Well, the reason I'm talking about saying what you mean is because later on in this episode, we're going to be having a chat with Dr. Dennis Barron. He's written a new book, You Can't Always Say What You Want, The Paradox of Free Speech.
Oh, that is interesting.
It's the free speech episode. We've been avoiding it, right? We were sort of dancing around it for a while.
I'm really interested to hear what this guy has to say.
Since Dennis and I spoke, I noticed that Storben Planker was on Twitter. Not because I can see him, because he's blocked me, but he was crying. He was just beside himself because somebody's book got rejected from publication, denying a writer their constitutional right to have a book published, which is just censorship, apparently.
or just capitalism.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
It's just like, your thing sucks. Sorry.
The free market has spoken. Anyway, a lot of people say that they're free speech absolutists, and by that they mean that they think everybody should be able to say anything.
Good news.
What?
They're right.
That you can.
They are?
Essentially.
Yeah, they're absolutely, they are describing the reality that we currently exist in completely.
Oh, sorry, I forgot an important bit. Without consequences.
On Twitter.
Right. Yeah, okay, cool.
Without anybody saying anything mean about you or,
I want to be able to say the most awful, hateful, vitriolic nonsense in the world, but no one can say it back.
So in my chat with Dennis Barron, we see that this has never been the case in the history of the world. There have always been consequences for speaking, limitations on expression, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes bad, and we talk about them all. So stay tuned for that.
Very cool.
Neat. Oh, before we dig into that good stuff, shall we find out what's going on in the world of linguistics in the week gone past?
Well, I do have a plug. Shall I do the plug first?
I suppose.
Okay, our latest bonus episode was a mailbag in which we laid down the data, Ben's data, about either, neither, neither.
My favorite thing we've ever done.
That was actually incredible. That is definitely the hardest I have ever laughed in one of our episodes. Is hearing
it was.
the corpus of my eithers, eithers, neithers, neithers just rapid fire.
Well, it's all out there on our website for episode 69. Even if you can't listen because it's a patron episode, you can still download. Anybody can download the data and find out, why does he say either or either or neither or neither? We also found in that episode that there's a bias toward the first half of the alphabet in lists of names and cities and things like that. And we speculated on why that might be.
Giving rise to another bonus piece of content.
Do you mean the bit about Hedvig talking to Steve about how Benford's Law could be a thing?
Hedvig, in that episode, for those who did not listen to the last episode or could not listen to the last episode, got I'm going to say a little bit like hung up on one of the aspects of the math in one of our discussions, which is totally fine and normal. Like I get hung up on different aspects of all sorts of things in our discussions. But then we basically like threw down the gauntlet for her to engage her very math familiar husband at a PhD level on this topic. And then for a laugh, we were like, oh, by the way, you should record it. And then she was like, bet, and did it. So you can go and listen to it.
Also, it was like passing a bug because I told Steve, like, do you know about Benford's Law? And he's like, I vaguely heard about it. And then he spent like a long time researching it. And then he like wrote a little Python script and like generated data and made plots for us. And then we talked and he made like a whole plan. And I was like, oh, I think this is going to be a short chat. We talked for like over 50 minutes. And then multiple times I had to be like, babe, I think but we were both really interested. And I had to like put on my like Ben hat to be like audience length, dumb.
Yeah, you just had to be dumb.
Yeah.
That's right. That's my hat.
Like how
it's the dumb hat.
Because the truth is in our household, when we don't record math for podcast, we frequently talk about math for just like hours.
And you hadn't ever mentioned Benford's Law. That's so fascinating.
No.
It was that poser Zip. He was taking up all the oxygen in the room.
Yeah, bloody Zip. Get out of here.
All right, so
dilettante.
Here's the thing. If you become a patron, here's what you get. You get bonus episodes. You get our yearly mail out, which is winging its way to your mailbox sissy. You get extra bits like the Benford's Law bit with Hedwig and Steve. And then you get live shows. And then I forgot, you get access to our Discord server, which is full of great people having fun.
It's neat. It's a really good place to hang out. If you, like me, are of an age or older where you can remember sitting around in IRC channels or like on Usenet boards or like just random forums for like niche interests, it's basically that. It's pretty great.
Well, if you're a patron, we give you so much. We give you all we got. So become a patron and get all those things. Patreon.com/becauselangpod. All right. I'm ready.
Pew.
Hey, Daniel.
Yep.
What the bloody hell has been going on in the world of linguistics in the last couple of weeks?
This story was suggested to us by Ignacio. A piece of bronze in the shape of a hand was discovered about a year ago in northern Spain. And there's been a bit of deciphering going on. We think we know one thing that it says.
Wait.
That's pretty cool.
The hand says things.
The hand speaks the truth. It's an oracle, and it can tell the future. So that's really
sign language, obviously.
But it only does it in Basque. Yeah, that's right.
So my question is, the bronze hand has some script on it, I'm assuming.
Yes.
This is the thing that we're actually reading.
Okay.
Yes.
And the script is in Basque.
It may be the oldest example of Proto-Basque.
Okay, so that was going to be my follow-up question, because like, if it's like, oh, the script was Basque and we can read a word, I'm like, I'm pretty sure people know more than one word of Basque out there. Like, there's a whole population of people who know thousands of words.
Why couldn't they read the other 4 words?
Yeah.
I'm going to get into that, but let's first of all set the stage. There was once a Basque settlement located on Mount Irulegi, and it had been there for centuries, but around 70 or 80 BCE, there was a war for control of the area because that was an important area for whoever wanted to control Rome. So they unfortunately backed the wrong horse in this conflict, and the winners burnt the settlement to the ground. But what that did was it preserved bits of the houses and artifacts because all that stuff was stuck under a big old layer of adobe and charcoal.
Okay.
So last year, researchers found this bronze hand. It's called the Hand of Irulegi, and it has characters in a kind of Iberian script. It looks a lot like Latin, but it's earlier than Latin, and it has some unfamiliar characters in it.
So it's 2,100 years old.
About 2,000 years. 2,100 years old. Yes, that's about right.
Okay.
So we used to think that the Basque language, Euskera, was not a written language. We thought that maybe the Romans had given them the alphabet and then they started writing from there. Because all we had was a few coins. We didn't have anything good. But now we can see that they did use writing. They used a kind of script that is pre-Latin.
It's pretty recognizable, though. Like, I'm looking at this picture in our show notes, and I can see an S and an N and an H and a T. I don't know if they mean those things necessarily, but like the letters are very recognizable.
Yeah.
Let me just get there. Yes, you're right. You know what? You look at the N, and that looks kind of like a jaggy sort of N. What else? S looks like an S. E looks like an upside down backwards F.
H, T, D, N, X. I see a lot of things.
Now, there are some funny ones though. There's like a weird lollipop symbol and like kind of like a butterfly looking thing and a few other weird ones. But yeah, like I'm seeing more similarity here than when I see like Cyrillic script, for example.
Exactly. And that's because the Iberian scripts were kind of a precursor to, in fact, they were some of the earliest alphabetic systems in the world, by which I mean the symbols represent sounds and the sounds represent both consonants and vowels.
Okay.
Now, the word that they can figure out was sorioneku.
Okay.
That was what that's supposed to say, which sounds a lot like the modern Basque word zorioneko, which means good luck or good omen.
It sounds a lot like it, yeah.
Yeah,
it really does. I'm surprised that
like
it's changed so little. That's really, really weird to me.
I think that happens sometimes.
The other words have changed a lot, which is why we're not able to read them, but we think we, have a few ideas. One of them seems to be es, which means a negation marker somewhere. The words have dots between them, which is how you know where the spaces are. But the other 4 words, not sure.
Is it a case of, can I posit a little Ben Ainsley homebrew based on nothing theory, everyone's favorite?
Why not?
Is there a word for word fossils in a given language that stay fossilized because they get used in a kind of vaguely ceremonial sense? So like the obvious one I would go to is something like cheers or prost or like skol or something, right? Like where even if the meaning as such doesn't really necessarily get bogged down, that act, that thing just keeps getting done, keeps getting done,
it has
keeps
to be
getting
done
done.
in that
so
way.
like wishing someone good fortune might just be like the way that you say you're welcome or something. I don't know. And because it always gets used that way, it never really changes that much. Is that a thing? Because it seems to me like of good fortune or like good luck or something is a very strong contender for something people say ritualistically to each other.
What do you think, Hedvig?
I think that we think that things that people say a lot tend to get like phonologically worn down. But I was thinking that there's maybe something for Ben there if like something is like ritualistically very important. Maybe not something you say a lot, but something like you say in church or something.
Oh yeah, like at a wedding or a funeral or something like that.
Yeah, if it's like if the words are like excessively important, then maybe people slow down. I don't know.
We've talked about ultra-conservative words that are, for example, on the Swadesh list, there is a list of maybe 200 or 100 words that are thought to not change very much, even though they do. Things like blood and woman and man and children and family words and things like that. But I'm not sure if that's really nothing on the Swadesh list is really ceremonial.
No, but the Swadesh list is more like things that are unlikely to be borrowed.
Ah, yes.
Which is not really the same as ultra-conservative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, could they have just got it wrong? Like, is this just a case of like a word now accidentally sounds and looks a lot like a word from back then and they're not actually connected?
But 2,000 years ago is not ages ago.
Yeah, and it's a very long word. I mean, the other thing that ties it in is that it's normal for this hand to have good luck written on it because it was probably nailed up to the top of a doorway with the fingers down. So as a way of wishing success upon the house.
Oh,
so
yeah, okay.
That would be a totally normal thing for this hand to have on it.
Yeah. No, it very probably means that thing. But about the script, I was going to ask, so Daniel keeps saying pre-Latin, but 2,100 years ago, Latin did exist. And the precursors to what we call the Latin alphabet also existed, probably even for Latin. And this is Mediterranean, so... And don't we sort of think that, like, Phoenicians, blah, blah, blah. So, like, it's a whole Mediterranean thing. They're all inventing this alphabet. It's a little bit maybe unclear who did it first and how it spread. But, like, they could very well be related to Latin.
That's right. So let's delve a bit into that. So the way it's usually represented, and the way that I've taught it is, you got the Phoenician alphabet, then Greek comes from that, then Old Italic, like the kind of script that we see on the hand, and then Latin. And the Italic scripts are kind of represented as the precursor to Latin script. But Hedvig is right. They were all kicking around at kind of the same time. What's important here is that formerly we thought that the Basque borrowed their script from Latin, and this shows that they probably didn't touch the Latin characters at all. They were probably using an Old Italic script.
Fair enough.
Like one of the sources that Latin got it from.
Yeah.
Kinda.
A Mediterranean is just like a big lake, hey?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's kind of big.
The migrants who are trying to cross it probably don't see it that way,
it's
but
pretty
yes.
big. So it's thought that this hand, if we can do more work on it, figure out what the other characters are,
Cool.
It may help us to trace the origins of the Basque language.
That's
So
really
there you
cool.
go.
That is
Hey,
right.
can I finish off with one funky little Basque-related question?
Okay.
Is there anything, again, like non-linguist Ben asking dummy question, Basque, I know, is a language isolate, which means it is got no familial relationship to any other languages, not unlike, like what are some other ones? Like the Ainu language of the indigenous
Japanese.
peoples of Japan. Japanese, really?
Well,
Japanese, Korean.
let's pick some easy. Burushaski in like
Okay.
there are other ones. Yeah, there's about a list. Like there's about 100 to 200 of them. I made a blog post once trying to count them.
I can tell you right now that I'm not going to be telling Hedvig which ones are the language isolates. I totally defer to you, Hedvig.
It's just that like Japanese Korean people argue so much.
Hold on. We didn't even get to my question yet. My question is, isolates exist in the world. They're super neat and cool as a concept, right? Just this language just like exists and then like doesn't have anything to do with other languages. Is there any research, any data that suggests that language isolates suffer sort of word change slower?
I don't think they do.
Like, would this word be unchanged in Basque, at least in some part, because Basque is a language isolate?
No. So one way to think about isolates that's important to keep in mind is that you can also think of them as the only surviving member of their family.
That's it.
Okay.
Right? So there's no reason to think that there didn't used to exist Basque's relatives, maybe all around the Iberian Peninsula and in France and something at one point. And circumstances such as the Roman invasion and whatever wiped out all the other ones.
It's just the Basque one.
I got to be honest, this is like a real mind blow moment for me because for my entire 11-year history on this podcast, I have genuinely thought that language isolates were like Marvel like monsters that just got created in a lab and just existed by themselves with like no relation to anything else.
Well, yeah, just we don't know this, but just like out of like if we pick
but like realistically, when you think about it, of course they would have family members. It's just they're not around anymore.
And there are also like there are a lot of language families in the world that have very few languages in them, like maybe 2, 3, 4, 5.
I know like Finnish and Hungarian and Estonian are like one language group and there's no other members and stuff.
No, they're
right?
in Uralic and they have like a bunch of neighbors in the Russian Federation, like Samiatic languages.
Oh, okay.
And maybe, this is also where like people are like, ooh, are there like deeper families that are larger that we can pull these isolates into? Blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
But if you think about it, humans have had language for like 100,000, 200,000 years. One of them, probably. And the population has been pretty low for a long time, but we spread out all over the world. And the 7,000 languages that exist today and the, let's say, 200, 400 language families, depending on who I want to pick a fight with today, there's no reason to think that there weren't more in the past, that there weren't more languages that died out and more language families.
That's really cool. Sorry, I digressed just then, but we need to move on. Sorry.
Let's move on to another story, and this one was suggested by Burek au Fromage, and it is about runes and a new runestone discovered which pushes back this is happening a lot lately, the history of runes in Norwegian languages.
Can I ask a question straight out of the gate?
Yes, please.
Does a rune refer to a particular character from a particular script, or is it a word that we give to a bunch of different characters from a bunch of different languages? And if so, what makes something a rune as opposed to a letter or like something else?
A rune is usually referring to members of a certain set of alphabets.
Okay.
So in the north of Europe, there are different runic alphabets.
Okay.
And they're related and they look a bit similar, and they're usually used to, but just like any other alphabet, you can technically write French in runes. Like, there's no reason.
Gotcha.
It's an alphabet, right? It's not a language. That is, as far as I know, that there's someone that are more well known, like the Futhark.
And it's called Futhark because the first characters are F, U, theta.
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Futhark is just
it's like a QWERTY keyboard.
Yes, exactly. It's like saying like that the Latin alphabet is called like A B C D E F.
ABC.
Well, it is because it's alpha and beta.
Oh, true.
And also, you say like, "Do you know your ABCs?"
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do you know your Futhark?
So more runes have been found for one of these languages or several of these languages?
This one's Norwegian, but I'm going to defer to Hedvig on this one.
No, Daniel has read it. I'm reading it in Norwegian right now. And it is so funny because it is like reading troll language. I don't think they would mind.
So ruthless to the other Nords. Honestly, you guys are always so mean.
You're always on each other.
It's similar to when Germans hear so like different languages conserve different words. They have picked a bunch of archaic words that we didn't pick. So when I read it, it sounds old-fashioned. But it
sounds like Gimli in the Mines of Moria.
Do you think Swedish would sound the same to Norwegians?
Probably. Like we picked other things that are archaic. So Germans think I'm funny sometimes. So it's all good.
So Hedvig, you read in troll language, and Daniel, you explain.
Okay. What I'm doing is I'm reading the tweet storm from Christer Vashus, who is a PhD candidate at the Norwegian Language Collections. And so here are some of the facts. It's found on top of a grave. It seems that the skeletal remains of the grave are carbon-14 dated to 25 to 120 CE, but that might not be the same time that the stone was put there. The inscription says Ideberug. The Ed means deed, and the Berug means descendant, so it could be a family name. And somebody carved F-U Thorn on the side, so that could have been Futhark. So this could have been practice. This could have been somebody just...
That is also fun to think that it is F-U...
a person called Thorn. Exactly what I thought. Fuck you, Thorn. Fuck you, Ruha.
I know it's not. It's just funny. You said it, Daniel. You said it so plainly. I was like... Does he hear that he says what he says? Okay.
So some of the interesting things, I was looking at a video by rune expert Jackson Crawford, and he points out that one of the characters, is it the S, has not 3 jaggies, but 4.
Okay.
4 it's like a jaggy pattern. It's got 4 jaggies instead of the usual 3. And he thinks that might be because this is part of a creative period. Everyone was having fun with language. They were playing around.
Well, like that happened for English, right? Like I remember, like if you read books from like 200, 300 years ago, like, man, stuff was fast and loose.
Yeah.
There's a bit of play.
They were doing all sorts of crazy nonsense.
I think we need to get back there.
Yeah.
Yes, please. So what this means is that this pushes back this isn't the beginning of runic writing, but it might be around the middle of runic writing, but it's pushing back the middle a bit.
Oh, that's cool.
Do we know about where it came from? Because it doesn't look like Latin script. Some people like to argue that it was borrowed from Latin script, but other people say, no, it's not at all. What do you know, Hedvig?
I thought it was influenced by Latin script as well. I mean, honestly, all over Europe, you get these... I'm not saying that it's as, like... For example, the Norse god pantheon, some of it is suspiciously similar to, like, Roman gods.
Yeah.
But then everyone has a fertility goddess. So, like, maybe that's just like, you gotta have one.
That's like a combination of borrowing and convergent evolution.
Yeah, or I see it as borrowing, even though it's just like, you gotta have one. It's what we all do. I don't know where the runic alphabets came from. I thought it was some sort of Mediterranean import, yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm really excited that we're still finding out things, that we're still discovering things, we're still finding super old writing. It's not all been done. And for 2 of these discoveries to come out in the same, 3-week period, it makes me feel really happy.
It's really neat. I like to imagine someone, some archaeologist / linguist in, a cave on a remote windswept island somewhere, looking at some stuff on a wall and being like, hold on, hold on. That shit doesn't look like the shit I know about. And just being really, really excited.
Yeah, it says here that the people who discovered it in Norway, Steinar Solheim, became målløs, which means speechless when they realized. Really cute.
It must just be such a moment.
Exactly, right? So few times in my life, in the humdrum, boring normalcy of my life, am I ever rendered speeches or literally yelling for joy or something like that, right? It must be such a emotionally potent moment. And I really good for them.
Do you want to hear me try and read the Norwegian and do my best Norwegian?
Sure. Only if you do it quickly.
Okay. Jag blir väldigt överraskad. Du stoppar nästan att pusta och blir lite mållös när du förstår vad det står överför här.
Now say all of that in Swedish.
Jag blir väldigt överraskad. Man slutar nästan att andas och blir lite mållös när man förstår vad det är man står inför.
To be honest, the only difference I could pick up is that you were doing a dwarf voice for the first one.
No, I was doing Norwegian. My best Norwegian.
I just felt like the first one you're like, största form på torget för dem. And then in your voice you're like,
language.
That's
their language.
And what does it mean in English?
I was very surprised. One almost stops breathing and becomes speechless when you understand what you are standing in front of.
Wow.
That is really, really cool.
I love getting close to that.
Yeah.
Let's wrap it up with a recent tweet by Richard Dawkins on Twitter. Here's the tweet.
Okay.
It's fun to dig into some bad linguistics every once in a while.
I know he came up with meme as a concept, but still... What a yucky
Maybe
man.
not all of our listeners know, but Richard Dawkins sometimes says things that are very uncalled for. Is maybe the way.
Yes, he does.
He was like, do you know what? Here's what I'll say on Richard Dawkins. He kind of like set the template for like 1,000 people after him of like a really smart person who had some really interesting things to say about their area of expertise, being given a microphone and then just going drunk with power and saying a bunch of stupid shit time and time and time again. And like, I feel like that just has happened heaps more times since then.
A few more times. I'm not even sure that he's that good a biologist. He's been going like hard on this whole, gender is just XX and XY, which is really dumb biology.
Yeah,
also,
anyway, that's not how it plays out at all.
And now it's time for some dumb linguistics from Richard Dawkins on Twitter. He says, a lexicographer estimated that the average 19th century peasant used a vocabulary of 250 words. An educated person, 5,000, and Shakespeare, 27,000-ish, though that last number is disputed. Then Dawkins says, does that figure of 250 make origin of language seem less mysterious?
Okay, so we need to unpack this. Origin of Language is like a famous book, is that right?
I think he didn't have enough room to write The Origin of Language.
Okay.
Here's the idea. Language would have been hard to come up with for early humans. I mean, only humans have done it. Other animals haven't done it. So it must be kind of hard. But if it only takes 250 words, and people in the 1800s were walking around with only 250 words, then maybe it's not so hard for a language to start after all. That brings down the complexity of the task.
Can I ask, do we accept... I pity the poor lexicographer that this guy has quoted. Do we believe this figure?
No, we don't.
We don't.
And people,
okay, good.
People dug in, and it seems like this number comes from like hearsay of some. It was like a priest or something who said like,
yes.
I think that the villagers in my town where I'm a priest have about this many words.
Like if someone was to ask me, like, how many flowers are in the downstairs garden at your apartment building? And I just like glance out and I'm like, I don't know, about
20 or 30. So I found this tweet from Tabitha McIntosh on Twitter, @TabithaSurge. She says, I checked the source trail on this buffoonishly stupid statement. It's from Friedrich Max Müller in 1866, citing Reverend A. Dorsey, who in 1861 cited some dude. Now here's the money quote. A country clergyman informed me that he believed the laborers in his parish had not 300 words in their vocabulary, and a recent article in the Quarterly extend the statements to the great mass of our rural population. So he's like, I reckon my parishioners are so dumb they don't know 300 words between them. And now Richard Dawkins, hundreds of years later, is citing this.
Unnamed, random...
Country
not even
clergyman.
priest, like middle rank clergyman is the source. Okay,
has been sent out to some parish that he's not enjoying, and is maybe already then using hyperbole, being like, "Oh my god, they don't even know 250 words." Am I right? Like, I don't know if he believes it,
wow.
right? Like, and also we're comparing, and where people are like, "Oh, Shakespeare, whatever." Shakespeare's plays, humans. I fully support the idea that like you don't need that many words to get by on a day-to-day basis. Like if you count like the number of unique words that I say to Steve every day when we don't talk about maths, it's probably not that high, right? But if I'm writing like a book or writing like a play, it's probably different. This whole thing makes me upset. And I just think that okay. Dawkins, he's shielding it in this kind of like, I'm just asking questions. What do you think about this? Which is at least better than being like, meh, but,
Like, I like that there's a couple of really, like, key dog whistles here as well. Like, there's a sniff of, like, Western, like, civ supremacy because he's, like, name-dropped fucking Shakespeare. There's, like, a sniff of, like, great man theory of history because it's just like, the average person was barely human. Like, it's like dropping a couple of just super out-of-fashion social approaches to basically every part of human existence.
Even so, 250, anybody thinking for a few minutes should realize that 250 is laughably small.
That's like a 3-year-old, right?
Actually, a 3-year-old would be much higher than that. I took a look at the top 1,000 words, and so this is one account of the top 1,000 words in English. If we only take the top 250 words and exclude all the others, here are some of the words that you'd be without. The number 4, head, black, long, little, house, and yes.
Okay.
250. So which then gives us the question, how many words does a person today know, and has that changed since 1800?
We have writing now and much larger societies, so we are bound to have...
Shit got real complex.
But I don't know if that makes us better.
No,
we just have more shit.
Yeah.
And also, like, grammar and phonology.
Instead of rubbing, like, fucking bison into cave walls, I'm just, like, walking around the fucking Ishimura trying not to die from space aliens. Like, it's... Like,
yeah, but also, like, we're talking number of words. What is a word? What is a phrase?
No.
Yes, you're absolutely right. What is that?
I am putting a firm full stop after the what is a word impulse. Okay,
that's a wonderful point. That's a super good point. We won't have time for it today.
It's okay.
Also,
I'm just
putting it out there.
He's like, it's fine. I'll wait.
I'm just asking questions. I think that the number of words hasn't changed that much that a person would know from 1800 to now. We've forgotten a bunch of words, but we've also gained new words. I don't think it's changed that much. The linguist David Crystal has estimated that most people would have an active vocabulary of around 50,000 words. Maybe a really well-educated person somewhere around 75,000 to 100,000 active vocabulary. Again, leaving aside the debate over what counts as a word. And passive vocabulary, the words that you can recognize even though you wouldn't use them yourself, probably a third, again, more than that. So, 250, laughably small. Most people know many, many more words. And that's the name of that tune.
Q.
I'm speaking with Dr. Dennis Barron, professor at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. He's the author of What's Your Pronoun? The English-Only Question. That's right, I'm pulling out the deep cuts. And, most recently, You Can't Always Say What You Want, The Paradox of Free Speech. Dennis, thanks for coming on the show and talking to me today.
It's great to be here, Dan.
The subtitle of the book is The Paradox of Free Speech. What is the paradox you're referring to exactly?
Well, it is basically that we're free to say anything we want to anybody we want, but there are always limits. There are limits that we apply to ourselves. There are limits that are imposed on us sometimes by the law, sometimes by organizations that we belong to, sometimes by friends and family. So paradoxes, we're free to say what we want, but within, sometimes we don't even realize that we are monitoring what we say and tailoring it to fit the expectations of the people we're talking to, avoiding certain taboos or breaking them, knowing perhaps that we have to face the consequences for any language transgressions. So, like family might have a no swearing rule for the children. which the parents don't necessarily observe. And you know how effective that is. Even if they have like what they call a swear jar, where you have to put a nickel in or a quarter in every time you say a forbidden word, but then kids grow up and they're still swearing. So, policing language in that sense doesn't really seem to work very well.
Suppose not. And I've seen people freak out about the idea of self-censorship. Oh no, you're imposing a set of conditions that are making me self-censor. And I just think that's a good thing. Sometimes not saying the thing is a good thing.
It's a natural thing that happens. It's a social phenomenon. Language is, both legal and social in terms of the restrictions and freedoms that we exercise. And sometimes we're not entirely aware of the social limitations. Certainly, most of us never bump up against the legal ramifications either. So, how often have you been pulled over by an officer of the law and written up for swearing in public? In many states in the U.S., it is still illegal. I don't know what the situation is in Australia, but certainly in the United Kingdom, it's illegal to swear on the streets in public. And there's even a guidance on the police website and their frequently asked questions about swearing, and it says, swearing is illegal in public, but you're not likely to be penalized for it unless you do it in front of a police officer.
Well, that's kind of the problem, because what happens is somebody will have a run-in with the police, and then if they do swear, because maybe they belong to a community that is more sweary, and then what happens is the people who get called up for this kind of thing are more likely than not to be Aboriginal people.
Right.
So it hits them harder, right? So we've seen a number of cases like that. So I haven't had any legal ramifications for language. I've had some social ones. And in the book, you pivot away from the social repercussions of language and you focus on the legal. And that's natural because freedom of speech, freedom of expression. Is it okay if I say freedom of expression? Because I don't just want to focus on speech.
Absolutely.
I want to focus on signed language,
Signing, writing, any form of communication. And I do try to indicate in the book that, when I say speech, it also includes signing, writing. It's kind of shorthand, but freedom of expression, the right to express yourself, to access information, and what goes along with that is the right not to be forced to say something or to write something or to sign something that you don't believe in. So it works two ways. It's like you're free to say what you want, and the government is really not supposed to impose restrictions on that, and the government is also not supposed to force you to say things that violate some deeply held belief.
Okay.
Like the earth is flat.
Yeah, okay.
Not to end a sentence with a preposition.
Gotcha. Now, freedom of expression is written into the U.S. Constitution, but in other countries it's not. In Australia, we like freedom of speech. We think it's pretty cool, but it's not one of the things in our Constitution. And I think the USA has a lot of unique issues when it comes to this topic. Can you make the case for me that this issue is relevant for non-Americans as well?
Sure. Even though it may not be inscribed in, does Australia have a written constitution? I reveal my ignorance here, or is it an oral tradition like the British Constitution?
It does have a constitution.
Yeah, and I believe Canada does, and I assume perhaps New Zealand.
I've never read it. Yeah.
Never read it. Okay, it's like the terms of service that you don't read, you just click to agree.
Just scroll to the bottom, yeah.
Scroll to the bottom. So the whole concept of free speech and government interference with speech is pretty universal. And even though the U.S. is an outlier among liberal democracies in terms of having free speech inscribed in its constitution, England and the EU take a more balanced approach to say you have free speech, but certain kinds of speech, hate speech, discriminatory speech, also can be seen as violations of the law and can be penalized by the government, by fines, by, I suppose, ultimately imprisonment, but I'm not sure. So that there's a more balanced approach to the freedom to communicate and the freedom to be safe from harmful communication. And so it's a concern there too. It's framed differently in terms of the legal system, but on the ground, in vivo, as you go through life communicating, you face the same kinds of problems. What kind of speech is okay, what kind of speech is frowned on, what kind of speech is going to get you trolled on the internet, what kind of speech is going to have your friends desert you, your parents correct you, your teachers mark you down, your boss fire you for saying something that they or writing something or communicating something that they disapprove of.
When I went to the dear old Brigham Young University, there were professors who were always in trouble because they, took a line against the church party line or the university party line. Yeah. And so there were always debates and discussions and issues surrounding freedom of speech. And I always felt a very strong kinship toward them and toward the freedom of speech angle because, the idea that freedom of speech is generally good, that people who try to repress freedom of speech are not on the right side. Why is it good? Can we just get down to bedrock? Why is freedom of speech a good thing?
Why would it be a bad thing? Okay, what's wrong with it? As Justice of the Supreme Court Louis Brandeis said in, I think it was 1927, the freedom to think as you will and to speak as you think. Why should there be restrictions on that? We're free to say whatever we want. We are not free to avoid the consequences of the speech, and that's where the social and legal systems come into play, because you utter something, you write something, and your audience, whoever it is, whether it's a targeted audience, I'm speaking to you specifically, or it's a general audience, or it's a passerby on the street, they are free to criticize you, to accept and congratulate you for saying what you said, to penalize you, to correct you, to laugh at you. And the worst thing of all for somebody like me, who's a writer, to ignore you, to ignore what you say. Oh my God, that's the worst thing,
But that's a wonderful thing, the right to ignore somebody, because I say this person is not. I've met people who say you should never ignore anyone because why would you ignore somebody? Everybody is deserving of your time. No, they're not. And not everyone, I have to make choices. There are so many people. Yeah. Not everyone's deserving of my attention.
Absolutely. Somebody says, look out for that cliff. Okay, maybe they deserve a little more attention. But if you're in the middle of the desert, maybe you can ignore them.
Yeah. And, maybe not everyone deserves a spot on the stage of a university.
Absolutely. Freedom of expression doesn't guarantee you a platform to express. That's something that, you have to negotiate. You have to be invited. You have to take your speech turn. Even in a normal conversation, there's this kind of turn-taking mechanism that applies, and people who violate the turn-taking mechanism are subject to, responses from the other people in the conversation. They can ignore them. They can say, hey, I'm not done. Don't interrupt. Or they can say, okay, they can just accept your interruption and move on. So it gets complicated, but yeah.
I've got a list because, from my wild and woolly days of everybody say everything, free speech, boosterism, I now have a more nuanced view. And I do have a list of kinds of speech that I would like to have banned or controlled. So can I just tell you what those are?
Yes. So if you're the boss of the world, what would you ban?
I'm the boss of the world. Hate speech. And when I say hate speech, I mean expression that encourages violence against a group of people. And the reason why I want to ban that, and make that illegal is not just that it might result in violent behavior against them, but also that it makes, I think, it makes people not want to identify as that group of people that you are vilifying or encouraging violence against.
Mm-hmm.
And then that has a chilling effect on their free speech. I would rather have their free speech than hateful, violent communication, encouraging violence against a group of people. What do you think?
Okay,
sound good?
Sounds good to me. But so let me think. Let me think like a lawyer.
Okay.
For a second,
Which
I am not a lawyer. I am not a lawyer. I do not play a lawyer on TV.
No.
Or on the radio. Or on podcasts.
Or on podcasts.
Okay. I would say, okay, how do you define free speech? I mean, look, there's a whole categories of speech in the U.S. that are not covered by the free speech guarantee of our Constitution.
Okay.
Threats are not protected speech. Obscene speech has always been viewed as outside the protections of the First Amendment in the United States. The question is, how do you define a threat? How do you define obscenity? The legal system has not been very good at establishing guidelines so that you know in advance or even after the fact whether you've crossed the line, whether you have said something that is obscene. You know, one person's obscenity is another person's lyric. So how do you define it? How do you know when someone has threatened somebody else? Is it an objective observer, if there is such a thing, who gets to judge it? Is it the person who receives the ostensible threat? Well, what if they are, just sort of generally paranoid and think of everything as a threat? What if the threat maker says in their defense, "Hey, I was just kidding."
Yeah, if they're really credible,
I
changes
didn't mean
the game.
it literally. I didn't mean it literally. Just joshing around.
Yeah.
Are they gaslighting you? Are they for real? Yeah, sometimes people make a joke and it falls flat.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people disguise a threat as a joke, as a means of self-protection. So you can't say, "I threatened you. I was just kidding." You know.
What about slurs? Do slurs count as hate speech?
They could. I mean, you get to define it. What you mean like a racial or ethnic or religious slur, like?
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah.
That kind of thing. Sure. You can sweep them into the category of hate speech pretty easily. I think, even if it's a single word. Why not? You're attaching a label or calling somebody a name. Fighting words are the kind of thing that justify a negative reaction to what you say. So yeah. The question is, when you establish a category like hate speech, and obviously that is the case in UK law. I'm not sure what the situation is in Australia. I think Canadian law tries to define various kinds of hate speech. They usually narrow it down to speech against someone for, say a sexist or sexual orientation or gender status or gender identification. Those sorts of things that you narrow it down to a category that makes it a little bit more easy to define in legal terms, in terms of setting boundaries and letting the public sort of know what kinds of speech is being discouraged. But even there are edges where it's not so clear how hateful this is, or what if you'd have a negative term and you use it in an in-group to flip it to something positive? There's that kind of issue as well. An outsider can't say that up to me or about me, but I can say it to my fellow members of this particular racial or religious group or ethnic group. That happens all the time, right?
Okay, so that's the hate speech category isn't that simple. We've already touched on my second category, which is threats, harassment, doxing.
Yeah, and those are, in terms of American law, and I imagine in terms of legal systems elsewhere as well, the threats are not protected in any way.
Okay.
The question then is establishing what counts as a threat.
Got it.
In the U.S. criminal law, you have to have intent. You have to have, sometimes it's called criminal intent, sometimes it's called mens rea.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically you have to be able to formulate a notion of right and wrong and that you intend something to be harmful rather than benign. You have to also utter something, not being forced to do it by somebody else. Somebody's not holding a gun to your head, physically or metaphorically, forcing you to make the threat. You're not talking in your sleep.
Interesting.
You understand the meaning of the words. In other words, if you don't speak a language and somebody hands you a card with words in that language and says, read those words, and those words are threatening in that language, but you don't know that because you don't speak the language, that absolves you. You're not making a threat legally in terms of American law because you don't know what the meaning of the words actually is.
Speech acts are complicated.
But I'll give you an example from the book. The earliest recorded prosecution for threatening a president.
Oh.
Now, threatening or making fun of the president is like a national pastime in the U.S. I think making fun of the leader is a national pastime anywhere there is a leader, right? But in, I don't know, it was 1798, 1799, around then, John Adams was the president, second president of the United States, passed a sedition law saying it was illegal to criticize the government for anything. I mean, this is a clear violation of the First Amendment, and people challenged it as a violation, but they were afraid to do so in public because that would be criticizing the government. People were arrested and fined for criticizing the government. Most of them were newspaper publishers that belonged to the opposite political party from Adams.
Stage. Wow.
But anyway, so here, speaking of setting the stage, John Adams travels from Philadelphia to his home in Massachusetts, passing through New Jersey. And he's doing it to avoid, I think it was an outbreak of yellow fever or something in the capital. And so he's going home to ride out the threat from the disease. And his carriage passes through a small town in New Jersey, and the residents know he's coming. And in honor of the president, as the carriage passes through town, they fire a 21-gun salute or something from, or some cannons. They're firing blanks. They're just, saluting the president. And this guy is standing outside a tavern, and somebody says, "Oh, they're just firing the guns at John Adams to hail his passage." And the guy says, "Oh, for all I care, they might as well be firing through his arse." And the tavern keeper is standing next to him because they're all outside watching the carriage go by. And he says, "That, sir, is sedition." And the guy gets arrested and tried for threatening the life of the president, even though Adams had no idea that any of this was going on. He's just sitting in his carriage trying to get home before, disease strikes. The cannons are firing blanks. Even if they fired at the president, nothing would have happened. And, the guy's just the local drunk, basically, just saying something snarky that occurs to him as the authority figure rides by. But he is arrested, tried, convicted, fined, and he sees this as a no-win case, so he pays the fine and gets on with his life. But, was that a threat?
I think not.
The prosecutor thought it was. The guy who turned him in thought it was. And, he's turning in a patron. This guy's going to buy less booze from him if he's in jail, right? But says it's against his own interest. And the prosecutor thought he was. The judge thought he was. And the guy finally decided it's easier to just plead guilty and get on with things. And besides, by that point, Jefferson had become president and the sedition law was allowed to expire.
Let's go to my last category that I would like to not ban, but I would like to control. And I think the control happens in different ways. Disinformation, which is, I think, harmful to the dynamic of gathering information and making informed choices. Like, we have this idea that free speech is good because we exchange ideas and the good ideas float to the top as people believe them. But disinformation from bad actors inverts that equation. Disinformation is an incredibly useful strategy. I mean, lies. Lies are incredibly advantageous. They're easy to make. They're quick to make. They can get out there. People already believe them. So I think I would try to control disinformation.
Okay, so you want to ban lies. You want to make lying illegal.
I can't make lying illegal. I would go to jail. But disinformation is a little different. How would I define that? It's
different from lying. Okay, so it is more...
I don't think I would like to legally sanction it, but I think I would like there to be good ways for social networks, hint, hint, to control, to do fact-checking. And I know...
For sure. But
that a lot of people hate fact-checking.
Well, a lot of people hate fact-checking, and when publishers stop fact-checking, a lot of stuff slips into edited material that should not be there. It's mislegal. They're honest mistakes. I mean, I've made mistakes in my writing, and if it hadn't been for fact-checking in the editorial process, that would have been embarrassing at best, problematic, sometimes leading to the exact opposite interpretation of what I had intended. So fact-checking is certainly important. How do you fact-check? How do you check anything on something like social media where you're dealing with millions and millions of posts a day internationally in multiple languages? Humans can't do this.
This is why it's so hard. I mean, nothing scales.
Nothing scales, and algorithms aren't very good at doing this. They cannot detect sarcasm or humor. They can't differentiate between a legitimate criticism and disinformation. You know, I mean, all this came to the surface with the start of COVID, where all kinds of disinformation starts appearing in a context where it's hard to get almost any kind of reliable information, and eventually you start, seeing the science and medical community weighing in, but even there's a certain amount of disagreement. And then people jump on, some scientific report that suggests something's not as effective as it should be, and then they amplify that, and
then it gets picked up by a social community that makes it a part of their identity, and then you just can't ever get out.
Right, and people, people get crazy. What are you going to do? You want to outlaw that? Outlaw crazy speech.
I don't want to outlaw it, but I don't think we can outlaw it. I think maybe we could do better at picking up on it, maybe somehow. But
Where
anyway.
would we be? Where would we be as commentators about language if everything was so buttoned down and regulated? We'd have to say, well, these controls are ridiculous.
Yeah. They might go too far. Okay, we'll tell you what.
You're destroying the data.
I'll work on that one. All right.
Look, we all have speech that we hate. We all have speech that we would like to ban if we were the boss of the world. I ask my students this every semester. I'd say, what's the one thing that you would change about language, about the English language, if you were the boss of the world? And invariably, there were three things that would come up. Too much swearing.
Oh, please.
This is from 18 to 21-year-olds.
Prudes.
Right, too much swearing. And I say, do you swear? And they say, yeah, I do, but it's too much. I know it's wrong. And I would ban it, because I can't stop myself, so there should be a law against it. Okay, so there's that.
Okay.
They would reform English spelling.
Yeah, good luck.
They would reform English spelling. English spelling is crazy. And they're playing right into my hands because we've got a whole unit on spelling reformers and how ineffective those movements have been since, the 13th century. Yep. Okay, and then the third thing is that they object to fillers. They object to people who say, all the time.
Those things are great, or like.
Or like, or or stuff like that. And so we talk about the importance of fillers in discourse and how they are basically placeholders to tell everybody else you're not through talking. They are, I'm just throwing the sound in here to let you know that I'm not giving up my speech turn, but I'm trying to formulate the next idea a little more precisely or something like that.
They help you remember things that other people say?
Yeah, they're all natural parts of speech function, but these are the things that my undergraduate students would invariably seize on. Those three things: swearing, spelling, and fillers, as if they were the boss of English. And then they have to come up with a way of banning this stuff. I didn't let them off the hook. What's your mechanism going to be? Are you going to do it through the education system? Are you going to do it through the legal system? How are you going to exert social pressure? Are you it's a great teaching tool because they would start thinking about what are the forces that control language that are good. Sort of external to the speaker. We like to think that we have free will. And of course we do, but in the context of a social setting where there are all kinds of hidden restrictions that we don't even realize, the lane lines, the categories, and so on, that we sort of unconsciously guide our locutions.
Okay, well then I won't try to ban disinformation legally, but I will try to. I think I like education. I think I'll try. I know it doesn't work.
Yeah, but
I'll try it.
It works. It works a little. There is a role for education. Long-time educators who don't believe in formal education, like me, but who realize that it keeps the lights on.
Okay, you're very optimistic. I'll give you that. Now that we've gotten through my things that I don't like, let's take a look at the people who actually have been in charge. What have they tried to ban or control? We've already talked about one, and that's obscenity. Mm-hmm. I guess that's difficult because we don't really know what obscenity is, but it involves judgment. You know it when you see it.
Yeah.
It involves judgment, but everything involves judgment, so that's not a problem.
Right.
I noticed in your book that you have banning different languages entirely other than English. What was up with that?
Oh, well, this is nothing new in the world of language regulation, but in terms of U.S. history, certainly the idea of what should be, the United States has not declared an official language ever. There have been moves to do so throughout its, 200-plus year existence. Mm-hmm. A number of the majority of states in the U.S. have declared official languages. Oh. The state I live in, the state of Illinois, declared in, was it 1923, that American,
not English,
was going to be its official language. Not English. This is part of. I mean, you got to put it in a kind of historical context.
Talk American.
This is part of the American reaction against World War I. It was a kind of shock to the American system to get involved in that kind of international conflict. In fact, the U.S. didn't enter the war for the first 3 years, 2.5 years of the war. We didn't enter till 1917. And, by 1919, it was pretty much over. But it was an amazing shock, and the pressure for the U.S. to remain neutral before the war was very strong. Opposition to the war in the U.S. was reasonably strong. The U.S. passed the Second Sedition Act in 1918, banning interference with the war effort, and several hundred people were arrested and fined for doing things like calling President Woodrow Wilson a bad name.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Some drunken guy in the middle of nowhere, Montana, says, "Oh, Wilson's a drunken bum. He's a stooge of the capitalists. I would go to Washington and blow the whole place up." He gets thrown in jail for sedition, for encouraging opposition to the war. When, the only people who heard him were 10 other drunks in the tavern, and he was, several hundred miles from the nearest army base, so certainly could not influence the troops to not cooperate in the war effort. Yeah. But, they threw him in jail as if he were an actual spy or somebody who is trying to shut down a munitions plant or blow up a recruiting office or anything like that. So in reaction to that sort of harrowing international war experience after the war, America retreated into its shell to a great extent. They wouldn't give Wilson permission to join the League of Nations, for example, because that was too international. They're all quoting George Washington's admonition to avoid foreign entanglements. And so as a kind of veiled message to the British, a coalition of ethnic politicians, basically Irish and Jewish politicians in Chicago, pushed through this law making American the official language. The Irish politicians didn't like the UK policy on Ireland, and the Jewish politicians didn't like the policy on Palestine, and so this was a message to the Brits. And between 1923, 24, and 1969, American was the official language of the state of Illinois. And in 1969, the legislature changed it back to English, being the official language of the state of Illinois, on the grounds that there was no such language as American. And, for that whole time period, schools still taught English. They didn't teach American. Everybody spoke English. They didn't speak American. But anyway, the concomitant idea was that if you spoke a foreign language, a non-English language, a non-American language, you were somehow unpatriotic. And that surfaced during World War I as well. In 1918, the governor of the state of Iowa, a guy named William Harding, banned the use of foreign languages anywhere in the state in public.
Wow.
And by in public, he meant on the street, on public transportation, trains and streetcars, basically, at public meetings, in schools, in churches.
Oh, what, even Latin?
I don't think there were very many mosques or synagogues, but there were churches in Iowa. And, he kind of silent on the Latin Mass thing, because this is before Vatican II, so the Catholic Mass was in Latin in 1918. But it was basically an attack on the German Lutheran and German Catholic churches in the state, which also ran private schools in German. And somebody asked him, well, why didn't you just ban German? Why are you banning all languages? And he told them with a straight face, the Germans are very sneaky. They've learned to spy in every language. And so I have to ban all those languages. And nobody thought to ask him, well, that means they can spy in English, right?
So ban English.
Yeah. Well,
The history does not record his response.
Yeah, government officials are not required to study logic, I guess. But
we were talking once a long time ago to Michael Gordon, who wrote Scientific Babel, and he recounts how that action, and others like it across the U.S. during that time, was enough to knock German out of its spot as a language of science. And it just isn't.
For sure. As a language of science, it also is a language that was before 1917, 25% of American high school students studying a foreign language studied German in their high school, in their school.
And after?
And after the war, that plummeted to single digits.
Wow.
Foreign language in general in the U.S., foreign language study never recovered from the pro-English sentiment that generated around World War I. And there were voluntary bans on German music, on German food. The producers of the National Sauerkraut Association petitioned to have the name of the food changed to Liberty Cabbage.
Not Freedom Cabbage, surely.
Not Freedom Cabbage. The Freedom Fries came later in a reaction to the
goodness gracious
anti-French feeling around the Gulf War. Just not that long ago. But this whole thing, and this was going on in Germany too. There was anti-English and anti-French movements in Germany during World War I. Foreign language signs were banned in Berlin. Cafes had to change their names from French names to German names.
There was a lot of assimilation going on.
National conflict always sort of targets language as a symbolic gesture. You see that with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where attitudes toward Ukrainian and toward Russian, it's a small, it's silly to talk about language when the bombs are going off, but in effect, you change how you refer to Kiev or Kyiv, and does that affect the chicken dish? Is it chicken Kyiv instead of chicken Kiev?
Yeah.
And it impacts the fate of teachers of those languages in the schools, and all sorts of language stuff going on with that. And in lots of post-Soviet Europe, you see language issues suddenly coming to the fore, banning foreign languages in the Czech Republic, for example, or in the Slovak Republic, all kinds of language conflicts. What do you do with the Russian teachers once you establish your own independence? Do they have to retrain as teachers of Lithuanian, or do they have to go back to Moscow, or what do they do? It becomes an issue.
Yeah. I noticed also in the book that it wasn't just different languages that were targeted, but so-called bad English. I noticed this thing from the Better American Speech Committee. Do you mind if I just read some of this? This was
Oh, please, go ahead.
A promise that students had to recite or take. It said, "I love my country's language. I promise that I will not dishonor my country's speech by leaving off the last syllables of words."
Yeah.
That I will say a good American yes and no in place of, in place of an Indian grunt and no or a foreign yeah or yeah and nope. Didn't know those were foreign. How about that? There's more, but
yep, it's part of the Americanization movement that was also flourishing before and during World War I and after it, because the U.S. was dealing with waves of European immigration from the mid-19th century on, but huge waves between the 1880s, 1890s into the 19-teens. And the idea was that schools became one of the focal points for Americanizing the children of immigrants, making sure they spoke English. And this Americanization committee, this American language committee of the Chicago Women's Club, at the time started what came to be known as Better American Speech Week, and it became a national phenomenon for a few years, where, and it was a two-pronged program. One was to get immigrant children to perfect their English. Many of them came with no English. My mother was born on the Lower East Side of Manhattan in 1911. Her first language was Yiddish. She did not learn to speak English till she got to kindergarten. And she basically learned it from interacting with other children who spoke English. And this was a common immigrant experience. Her parents had immigrated, but she was born in the U.S., but still her heritage language was her native language until she started school. And so the schools were teaching English to children who were born here to foreign-born parents, born in the U.S. to foreign-born parents, and they were also trying to improve the English of those who spoke English as their first language. And so what comes into play then are class issues as well as ethnic issues.
Yeah.
And so trying to get everybody to speak proper English was basically a kind of, upper middle class idea of what standard English ought to be.
Audience, we are doing lots and lots of air quotes during this section, like improve and better English.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that interested me, I knew my mother, when she grew up, became a school teacher. And I noticed as a child, when my mother would get together with her school teacher friends, that they all sounded funny.
Really?
To me. And they sounded like my school teachers as well. And they didn't sound like ordinary people. There was a kind of school teacher accent among the New York City school teachers. And then, later on, after I studied language in college and in graduate school, and the social pressures applied to immigrants, I realized that New York City was one of the places that established, in order to become a teacher, you had to pass a speech test.
Oh, really?
Not only did you have to have, a college degree and a major in certain courses and taking how to teach courses and things like that, but you had to go before a group of live examiners and speak, deliver a little oration. And if you had any trace of a foreign accent, or you had something foreign in your name, and that you were identifiably from some immigrant group, Irish or Italian or German or Jewish or whatever, that was a strike against you. And in order to pass the test, the candidates had to develop this kind of hyper-correct pronunciation.
Yeah, gross.
And so the teachers from my mother's generation who had to take that speech test to get their teaching license all spoke with this amazingly precise kind of English, which they used in conversation, not just in a teaching moment, but as part of their daily interaction. And to me, it sounded weird, but then I understood why that happened.
Yeah.
The state of California did that, kind of required a speech test too, in order to keep Asian students out of the teaching corps.
Yep.
So it was used to try to eliminate certain kinds of groups from the teaching profession. Yeah. The idea being that somehow you were going to subvert the kids if you were allowed to be yourself.
It's an old story, isn't it? It just happens over and over again.
Right, and we still are trying to control our teachers. We still are basically operating on the assumption that the teacher knows nothing, and the teacher can be told what to do, told which books not to teach, and which topics to avoid, and all of that kind of stuff. It deprofessionalizes what really is an important profession.
And that brings us right up to the present day, where we're talking about the authoritarian right trying to ban certain books that portray LGBTQ people positively, trying to ban what they call critical race theory, which is an academic pursuit, but not something that teachers consciously teach in high schools. It's just any acknowledgement that racism exists, basically. It involves removing books from libraries. Schools and teachers are under enormous pressure right now.
In the name of free speech, they're banning speech. Right? To protect the free speech of students and parents, ostensibly, they are banning books, they are banning topics for discussion. We are back to teaching that the earth is flat and the dinosaurs did not exist.
And this also goes to, I just picked up this Guardian article by Gloria Oladipo. The article's called Pronoun Fines, This is your area. And jail time for librarians. Republicans target LGBTQ plus rights with new laws. And I'll just read a section here. This is North Dakota.
Yeah.
One bill rejected on Friday mandated people affiliated with schools or institutions receiving public funding having to pay a $1,500 fine for using gender pronouns other than those assigned at birth for themselves or others. And that effort failed, but this is what they're trying to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, if you can't teach about pronouns in school, where are you going to teach about pronouns?
Yeah. Teach grammar, not pronouns, right? Or something. Yeah.
Grammar schools were called grammar schools because they taught grammar, right?
Yep.
Go figure. Go figure, North Dakota.
Yeah.
You know what? I was surprised when I read that story that they actually didn't pass the bill, because those are the kinds of bills that are being passed.
Yeah.
I mean, what was the opposition? I'm glad it didn't pass.
It's a good thing.
It's an example of how crazy legislators can get. I mean, they're reflecting a general attitude. People are buying into this. It's not like they came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Right? They feel empowered to do this because they feel there's enough public support for banning pronouns.
By which we mean, what, singular they? Or
by which we mean,
neopronouns?
The pronoun has become a symbol for wokeness rather than a placeholder for a noun.
Well, that makes sense, though, because, pronouns stand in for things. So I guess when you're demagoguing pronouns, you're demagoguing people.
That's absolutely true. And, of course, that is the history of pronouns. The history of pronouns is one of including and excluding, right?
Yeah. Right down to the inclusive we and exclusive we, but also who we bring into society and who we keep out.
Exactly.
The book is You Can't Always Say What You Want, The Paradox of Free Speech by Dennis Barron, professor at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. It's available from Cambridge University Press. Dennis, how can people find out where you are and find out what you're doing?
You can follow me at Dr. Grammar on Twitter and follow me on Facebook. And I haven't been blogging very much lately, but I do blog at the Web of Language. So you can check that space out, too. I will be picking up some themes from the book to blog about over the next few weeks.
The Web of Language is really worthwhile. I have assigned bits of that to my students on many occasions. Thanks for hanging out with me and talking about the book. This is really fun.
Thank you, Daniel. It's always good to talk.
It's time for Words of the Week, and the word of the week this time is the...
What?
The.
What? 3
little letters. It's the most common word in English, and it's been in the news.
How has the been in the news?
Yeah.
In times past, we've mentioned why you don't probably want to use the with groups of people. For example,
there was sound super racist. Yeah.
Well, yes, like when a right-wing political figure referred to the blacks.
Ooh, such shivers.
Why is that gross? Why does that give you the shivers?
Well, because it collectivizes and objectivizes a group of people.
Right, okay.
There's 2 things going on in that one. There's the, and then there's, I don't even want to say, there's blacks instead of black people, which is also a thing. So there's 2 things that are converging.
Yep.
Yeah. It makes it sound a bit like not humans, like inhumane, like the zebras in the zoo.
So the word the is really interesting as opposed to So if I say, I bought a car, I bought the car, what's the difference between those 2 sentences? Do you get a different feel? I bought a car.
Yeah.
I bought the car.
Well, when you say it like that, my brain goes, there's some sort of prior understanding about the car, right?
That's
like
it.
That you've discussed the car previously and the person you're interacting with understands which car is the car.
Mm-hmm.
Precisely. So if I say I bought a car, what I'm saying is I bought a car and I don't think you know which one I'm talking about. But if I say I bought the car, I bought a car and I think you know which one I'm talking about. It's
fully.
Here are old versus here are new. So if I say the Mexicans or something, then it's like, and you know about them. Right? You know
exactly
who I'm talking
what I mean
about.
when I say that. Yeah, okay, that's interesting.
So that's why that's gross. So there was a tweet from the Associated Press Style Guide. Here it is. We recommend avoiding general and often dehumanizing the labels, such as the poor, the mentally ill,
Yep.
the French.
Okay. Do you know what? And
what?
The
disabled, the college educated.
No. But buckle up and try and contain your surprise.
Okay.
I actually support this tweet.
I do too.
Yep.
I do too.
And this is coming from like classically Francophobic Ben Ainsley, right?
Yep. We have a go all the time, and it's all in fun, right?
But I actually, in the same way that I don't find, much to the chagrin of pretty much every Australian I've ever met, I don't find making fun of people with red hair to be even remotely fun or funny or in good taste, like at all. Mm-hmm. And in Australia, it's like a national pastime, as far as I can tell.
I know.
And like for people outside Australia, you're probably being like, wow, Ben's being pretty like exaggerated now. But to the people who have lived here, Hedvig, like it is, right? Like it legitimately
It is a part of the Australians, the Anglo-Australians bonding ritual. They love teasing and talking down stuff as a way of making connections with other people.
And like people with red hair are like one of the last groups that you are like given free reign of just being ruthless about.
Yeah.
So I think that, we shouldn't do that with people from certain countries either, despite the fact that I totally do that all the time to people from France. I apologize.
I was going to say, like, if the person, like, I am more okay with making fun of people who are part of a privileged group. And the French, I'm like,
Well, that was the thing, right? I mean, the advice is not wrong. It can be really gross to talk about the blind or something like that. But just dropping the French in there, it just hit people in a really funny way. And the tweet went viral.
Can I ask, what do French people / the French think about this?
They don't suffer from experiencing Frenchness at all. They love it. They love being the French.
That's so true. Why would we be upset about this? Is it very good being to be French?
The French embassy tweeted that it had renamed itself the Embassy of Frenchness in the United States.
Hey, look, that's a pretty good, like, humoured way to respond, isn't it?
Which is interesting because if I say the Mexicans, that sounds gross, but if I say the French...
That's because it's not just about linguistics and grammar. It's like we were talking the other day about how ethnic groups and professions that are shit upon in societies have a higher terminology turnover.
Mm-hmm.
Like cleaners or Roma people in Europe, whatever new term they get, within a couple of years, people will use it as a slur. And that's not because of the word, it's because they disrespect the people.
Such as all of the different words we've had for like disabilities and that sort of thing, right?
Ethnicity and...
When you say the Mexicans, I happen to know something about Western civilization and how people look down upon Mexican people. That's why, like, that's part of it, right?
And of course, we call that cycle the circumlocution paternoster.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was Tim.
Tim.
The tweet got some bad reactions. People who were like, ha, you tried to be sensitive and you just sound like an idiot when you do that. What's wrong with the French? So they deleted the tweet, and here's the new tweet. We deleted an earlier tweet because of an inappropriate reference to French people we did not intend to offend. Writing French people, French citizens, etc. is good, but the terms for any people can sound dehumanizing and imply a monolith rather than diverse individuals.
Which, I got to be honest, I still back that. I still agree with that.
That is true. I just happen to think that that's funny 100%. To do to the French. But
it was funny.
But people got upset. Okay.
Also, we need to be like, I think what people are probably losing sight of here, right, is that this was tweeted by the Associated Press style guide.
Yep.
So this is not an entity that concerns itself with like colloquial speech at all, right? This is like one of, not the, but one of the definitive records of formal English writing.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's no other way to describe it. Or if there is a better way, you guys can have a crack, but that's my way of describing it.
No, I think it's really good.
Yep.
So like, yeah, they're going to be a bit stick up the butt because that's how formal registers work a little bit. And look, we will, on this show, we will often criticize when that stick up the butt is like the wrong kind of stick up the butt. But, like, I don't think that anyone has been, if anything, the AP is actually just kind of trying really hard to make sure the way that we execute stuff formally is still respectful. And I'm always up for that.
I think it makes perfect sense.
There was nothing wrong with the original tweet. They were right from beginning to end.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the next
What's our
one.
next word of the week?
This one was suggested by Aristemo. It's slow maxing.
Oh, I wonder if that's like min-maxing in video games.
I think it is.
What's min-maxing in video games?
Oh.
Min-maxing is when, like, so if you were to play a charming, cozy game called Stardew Valley, which my partner and I have played many a time, min-maxing would be like sitting down with a piece of paper and a pencil and like doing calculations to figure out the exact most efficient deployment of all of the different things you can plant so you can harvest them at the right time and get like the most money depending on how it's all going to play out. You can do it in D&D as well. Like Hedvig's holding up her character sheets right now where you can make sure that like if you've got a class and a character that works off strength and I don't know, like charisma, then you make sure you just don't have any points in the other qualities because that's just like wasted points.
Yeah. It can be considered boring behavior.
Yeah. It's like if you optimize everything, you're no longer playing, you're just doing homework.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to talk about min-maxing. I want to talk about slow maxing.
Yeah,
What is slow maxing?
This comes from an article in The Gauntlet by Amanda Wilson. Back in August 2022, there is a new philosophy on the rise called slow maxing. I would describe the movement to be the antithesis of hustle culture. It values finding the utmost satisfaction in indulging in mundane tasks to relax, as opposed to finding pride in cramming as much productivity as you can into your day. Taking it slow.
I dig it. I'm 100% behind this.
Yeah.
Approaching things with tranquility of mind.
What a great philosophy.
I used to go like a maniac in the days when this was a weekly show and I had a full-time job. And I don't have a schedule that's that packed out anymore, but sometimes kinda. And now when I get a load of things to do, I purposely stop myself and approach it with tranquility of mind. And I know that sounds like a cliche, but all the true things do sound like cliches.
It's true. Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I'm just here for this. Like maybe it's just getting older and boring and like being an elder millennial or whatever. But the idea of like having a big fat book and some tasty food on the horizon that's going to take me a while to make and be a little bit complex, but that's okay. And like, that's my day. What a bloody great day that is.
Yeah. And it doesn't, like, the examples here was like, you need to be slow maxing. You need to be reading long fat books, making 40-hour chocolate chip cookies. I don't even think you need to do that. Like, yesterday I pottered around at home and like, I went to the kitchen, I did something, and I went somewhere else. I don't know, like, none of it, I didn't do any major projects.
You need to feel okay about that.
I do like the idea, if I'm understanding this correctly, I think this does go a step further than just taking time. And it goes a step further to say, the things that you're going to do, actively make the choice for those to be slow pursuits, right? Like drawing something, but spending a long time doing it, or like they've said here, like making a recipe that requires several steps and needs to rest at several like parts of those steps. I like that. I like that idea.
We're not good at feeling okay about that.
Yeah, I was going to mention that as well, that like guilt and shame and judgmental feelings about yourself and others are things we all need to watch out for. Like, what are we feeling?
Yep.
I was talking to a friend of mine the other day who was like, oh, I should really, I shouldn't spend so much time on my smartphone. And I'm like, maybe you shouldn't. But also, is it like helping you manage your anxiety to watch cat videos? Is that the end of the world? Like, maybe that's fine.
Yeah, no.
Like, there's some sort of overuse, yes. But
definitely.
But there's also normal use. And like, maybe it's doing something good for you. And just because other people are like, oh, you shouldn't spend time looking at your phone. Like, maybe you should. Maybe it's fine.
Yep.
I saw a thing recently that was like, mindful, what was it? Mindful algorithmic curation. And I was like, fuck yes. Fuck yes. Get amongst that, my people.
Yes.
Like, make your For You page or your Instagram page or whatever it is just full of content that makes your life a bit nicer and just steers you towards versions of your best self. Do that.
Yeah, no, I 100% subscribe to this. And I'm really glad you said that word because I need a word for it because I've been trying to tell people about it. Like, don't engage.
Mindful algorithmic curation.
I like it. Don't engage with content that raises your blood pressure. Probably.
So many cat videos. So many cat videos. I'm going to have to send you some of the good cat videos I've seen. I'm sure you've seen most of them. Can we do one more, Daniel?
One more, and it is suggested by Monica. This is to Brexit. Can you guess what it means?
Is this to make a big, bold choice, and then when the consequences of that choice come along, just regret it tremendously?
No, good guess.
Okay.
Is it
You're on the right track, but in a certain way.
Lie to people?
Good. But no. Now I'm going to give you...
Propagandize for your own goals.
No, it's not. Now for guess 2, here's the quote from Twitter. WTF happened to your leg? That's me. And the Sun says, I Brexited a year 10 at football.
Oh, just fucking wreck something?
I Brexited a year 10 at football, but it happened to your leg.
Yeah, so you've hurt yourself wrecking something?
To hurt yourself badly.
Pretty much. Apparently it means, here's the rest of the tweet, it means a tackle in which either the man or the ball may get past, but not both, while the perpetrator wipes himself out. So I guess it's like a self-own.
It's a bit of an own goal, but you do achieve something whilst you are wrecking yourself.
But specifically a football move.
Oh, okay. Cool. I guess because football in England and stuff.
And for our European listeners, they mean not the things you kick
Soccer.
with your feet. Oh, is it a soccer thing?
Apparently this is a soccer thing.
Oh, okay, good. Then it is the thing you kick with your feet. I thought you were talking about like AFL and rugby and stuff.
No, not this time.
Okay.
Also, you kick both of those things with your feet. No big deal.
So the slow-maxing, Brexiting, watch out for that one, and maybe even mindful algorithmic curation. Our words of the week. Cameron on Patreon has a comment. It says, Hi fam, have you ever considered having an SLP SLT on the show? SLP SLT? Speech language pathologist or speech language therapist. After learning to speak a few languages, working as an on-call interpreter, and having a personal podcast-fueled interest in linguistics, I'm so happy to have finally found a career that allows me to work with so many aspects of speech production and language in a caring profession. I would love it if y'all have one of the many SLPs with a background in linguistics on the show, and perhaps even inspired others to get involved in this awesome career. Thanks for the great episode, and I'm eagerly awaiting the stickers in my mailbox.
Don't say it.
Did they say that? Did they? Oh, yeah, they did.
Yes.
Oh, my God. Oh, okay, Cameron, you are Daniel's new best friend.
Yeah, Cameron, I don't know if you've seen the episode of The Simpsons where Edna Krabappel sends Bart Simpson to the principal's office and then turns to the rest of the class and says, "What have I told you about encouraging him?" But I am saying the same thing to you now, Cameron. Don't encourage him.
So gross.
We've had episodes with speechies on before. We love our speechies. Not as often as I would like. But we are going to fix that because on an upcoming episode, we'll be featuring a newly minted SLT, our pal Pharaoh Cat, who will be curating a newsy show for us for a bonus episode, so watch for that. Become a patron on patreon.com/becauselangpod so you don't miss out. Thanks, Cameron, and I'm glad you found a jam that works for you. Big thanks to everyone who suggested things for this episode. Thanks to Dustin of Sandman Stories, who still recommends us to everyone. Thanks to the team of Speech Docs, who transcribes our every syllable. And, of course, our patrons who keep us going with all of their help, encouragement, and love. If you like this show, and I'm sure you did, here's what you can do. Number 1, send us ideas and feedback, and there are lots of ways to do that. You can follow us. We are Because Lang Pod everywhere on on every conceivable social platform.
No.
You can leave us a message except Spotify.
Yeah.
You can leave us a message with SpeakPipe. That's on our website, becauselanguage.com. You can also send us a little old email, hello@becauselanguage.com. Or, if you want to, you can tell a friend about us or leave us a review in all the places where reviews are possible to have been left.
And if that isn't enough, and if you love us even more than that, you can go the next step. You can level up our relationship by becoming a supporter to us on Patreon. Patreon is a great service where you can support podcasters and people you like, including us. If you become a supporter on Patreon, you get bonus episodes like Hedwig talking to her husband about math. You can hang out with us on Discord, and you make it possible for us to spend some money on things like Speech Docs making transcriptions, which are really practical, both for people who want to read the shows, but also if you are like, oh, when did Daniel say mailbug mailbox.
What was the first episode where Spicy appeared?
Yeah.
Oh, fun.
Or
fun,
if
fun,
you're
fun.
like a linguistic student and you're looking for a project for your bachelor thesis, you want a corpora? We got one. We made one for you. And it comes with audio. You need to sync it. We're not doing that. But hey, we got something for you. And we love being able to do that. And we can do that because of our wonderful supporters on Patreon. And our top patrons are Istin, Termi, Elias, Matt, Whitney, Helen, Jack, Farrah Cat, Lord Mortis, Grammar Yen, Larry, Christopher, Andy B, James, Nigel, Meredith, Kate, Nasrin, Joanna, Aisha, Moe, Steele, Margaret, Manu, Roger, Rianne, Colleen, Ignacio, Sonic Snedchog, Kevin, Jeff, Andy from Logophilius, Stan, Kathy, Rash, Felicity, Amir, Kenny Archer, Tim, Alyssa, Chris, and yes, that's the end. I had to double check.
Chris, for those listening at home, Chris appeared below the page break, so it was just like Hedvig was winding up for more names, and then there was just one.
Gotcha.
Our theme music has been written and performed by Drew Kraplianov, who's a member of Ryan Bino and of Didion's Bible. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time, because language.
Thank you.
So right before I jumped on with you, I have been playing a video game that just got re-released called Dead Space.
Okay.
I've never really messed with like horror games before. It's not really my thing. But looked real pretty and it like gory pretty. And so I gave it a try. Maybe horror games are kind of my thing. I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's all right.
And I've been thinking maybe horror movies are my kind of thing, but actually, you know what it is? It's just smart movies.
You've been watching Jordan Peele movies?
I have been thinking about Get Out a lot, and I've been, yeah.
So what I saw a great TikTok the other day, which was this person who was basically a creator of color who was lamenting the fact that, according to her, I haven't seen Nope yet, but she's like, Nope is without question Jordan Peele's like best movie from a movie making point of view. If by whichever line you cut it at, like a pure sort of craft storytelling, all that kind of thing, Nope wins. Get Out is still his overwhelming fan favorite because it is the one that is most accessible to and deals with whiteness the most.
Oh,
whereas,
interesting.
like, perspectives of color come far closer to the front in the other two films.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But us white audiences are kind of like, nah.
I didn't like that.
It didn't do the same thing for me. Because it wasn't
okay.
all about, like, the white perspective and the white world and the white, like, framing narrative and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
I thought that was a really interesting take. And
That is
so when I
indeed.
watch Nope, I'm going to have that sticking in the back of my mind to see if
I
it
am
alters
too.
my take.
I was just going to ask if my sound was okay, boring things like that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and Audacity.
You
I
sound
should probably record myself.
Yeah, exactly.
pristine. Yes, please record yourself. Yes.
You know that by complimenting my sound, you aren't complimenting me.
No.
I think she's saying you don't need to gild the sound lily to save her
wonderful.
feelings.
It's
Yeah,
pristine.
that is what I'm saying. Thank you, Ben.
Oh, that's good because I thought it was a reflection on your competence as a sound engineer.
Oh, boom, 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 boom. He makes a solid point. There is agency in the process.
Now that I've raised the stakes.
I am not a sound engineer, and I don't need to pretend I am one.
No, but you got a good setup and you sound good.
Okay.